There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all first aid kit for the backcountry. The more time you spend on trail, the more you realize what you need for your adventures that others might not even consider, which is one reason why I always recommend some sort of DIY or at least hybrid approach to your first aid kit. I've been using a DIY first aid kit for years, but have continued to refine it. I asked you guys on YouTube, 65% of you said you also use a DIY first aid kit, 5% use a pre-made, and then the rest of you, about 30%, use a hybrid approach. I'll show you everything that's in my first aid kit, tell you the things that I've added since my last video, and of course include links to everything down below just in case you're building your very first DIY first aid kit, or you see something here you want to add to what you already do take. Some of the things I've added or ideas I've had came from your comments, so please put your comments of things that you include in your first aid kit down below. And the last thing before we jump into what's on the table in front of me here, I should call this more of a first aid kit slash repair slash emergency kit. There's a couple of items that aren't first aid related, but I think are really important to have in one single bag to make sure I have everything that I need. The first thing I'll mention is an emergency or a space blanket. These are pretty simple, pretty cheap. I got a pack of 10 for $12, I think, off of Amazon. I haven't ever had to use one of these in the backcountry, but I always take one. A little bit bulky, definitely worth carrying. The next thing I'll mention is some gloves. I keep them in this little snack bag. I think you can order some technically sterile gloves. I'm not that worried about it, but I know hands can get quite dirty in the backcountry, so I really like having a pair of gloves, just in case you're trying to dress a wound and are really worried about getting infected. I just pulled 2 of these out of a box of gloves that I actually have for when I smoke meat. They don't take up hardly any room, and I like having them. The next thing is some non-stick gauze pads. These are great for larger wounds. We'll talk about band-aids in a second, but I always like having a couple of non-stick gauze pads just in case there's something big that needs to be covered, dressed, and kept clean while you finish your adventure. The next thing is something that I have changed from my previous first aid kit. These are pre-cut moleskins that you can use for blisters is probably the most common thing, but they do have some other uses as well. The way this is a change is I used to take this type of a moleskin. It's just a sheet and you can cut off whatever you need. But what I found is that when trying to cut this out, and you can see with how bad the cutting is there, it was really hard. I was using a really small pair of scissors on a pocket knife or just using a knife blade itself, and it was really hard to get the shapes that people needed when they got blisters. So I've ditched this full sheet where you have to cut out your own shape and instead opted for these. I picked them up off of Amazon. I got 15 sheets of 11 pieces for $8, and these should last me a really long time. I should mention another nice thing about building your own first aid kit is you can actually make several kits. I have a larger one that I use for backpacking, that's what's in front of me here. I have a smaller one that I take for day hikes, and an even smaller and lighter one that I use for trail running, adventure races, things like that. So making your own first aid kit means that you can actually make several and have them available wherever, whenever you need them. Another plug for a DIY first aid kit. Let's come down here. This is more of a emergency item, I guess, rather than a first aid item. This is something I can purify water with. So I've got some tablets here, we'll talk about those in a sec, but also a gallon-size Ziploc freezer bag, because tablets aren't going to do you any good if you don't have something to put water into. So I take a gallon Ziploc freezer bag that can hold water. It's nice because then you know how much is in there as well. And 2 different kinds of purification tablets, and that's a change from my last first aid kit. I have for a while carried these Aqua tabs, and they're great. They're super cheap, super affordable. It's basically chlorine, and it does a pretty good job of purifying water, but it doesn't actually kill everything in really nasty water, which is one reason why I started also bringing these Katadyn Micro Pure tablets. The advantage of these is, first, they treat some things faster. For example, Giardia. These will treat Giardia up to 5 times faster than the Aqua tabs do. And also these Micro Pure tabs, it's chlorine dioxide rather than just plain chlorine. It will also kill cryptosporidium, which is something that Aqua tabs or just plain chlorine doesn't treat. There's a really fantastic video about all the different types of chemical disinfectant you can use in water by a guy named Gear Skeptic. If you're interested in learning more about that, including the difference between these 2 types of tablets, I'll put a link to that right up here. So I take mostly these Aqua tabs, but I do have a few of these Micro Pure tabs, and I keep both of these in a little pill bag. The reason that's nice is I can actually write on here the volumes that the different tablets treat, as well as the treatment times. These pill bags are really nice to use in a first aid kit for several things. You'll see a bunch of different stuff that I have in these, as well as what you can write on here. All right, next, and this is another new thing, this is a compressed gauze tab. It's about the size of a credit card, a little bit thicker, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, but it's over 4 yards of gauze that's been compressed down super, super tight. The other cool thing is that it's guaranteed sterile until you've opened the package. I got 6 of these for about $15. Again, I'll include a link to this and everything else down below. This was an idea that came actually from one of your comments, so thank you for this because I'm really excited to include these in my backpacking first aid kit. Next, let's talk about Band-Aids. I've got them in this free plastic bag that I just got in something off of Amazon. It's actually got my Band-Aids, triple antibiotic ointment, and alcohol swabs. I like putting them in this bag, it just helps keep everything organized, otherwise the Band-Aids are all over the place. Unfortunately, I don't have a link to where you can buy bags like this, but if you've bought something off of Amazon lately, you've probably gotten a bag like this. Here's a couple really similar sizes from things I've bought recently off of Amazon. Stuff always comes with these extra Ziploc bags in there where they've just got little items. Just set those aside and then you can use them in your first aid kit or other stuff. Now, Band-Aids seem like a pretty mundane and obvious thing. I recently changed the type of Band-Aids that I take because I found some really awesome ones that stay on, especially in dirty and wet conditions, a lot better than the other Walmart ones I was using before. These ones are really great because they're super sticky and they stay on really well. And in this box, it's got 4 different sizes. You can see it's got regular Band-Aids, knuckle bandages, fingertip, and then some really large ones. These are super sticky and stay on for a long, long time. So I was grateful to find these and include them in my first aid kit. Now, the other stuff in that little baggie, as I mentioned, were some little alcohol towelettes. These are super helpful when you're cleaning a scrape. I am disappointed in how small they are. It seems like that's pretty standard. I used to take fewer than this until I realized how small they were, and it seemed like for just about any wound to try and clean it before I put a Band-Aid on, I needed to use 2. These are pretty cheap though. You can get a big box on Amazon for fairly inexpensive. I've also got little packs of triple antibiotic ointment. I used to take a full tube of this, but I realized that was just silly. I was never going to need that much on one single trip. The lid was just something else to lose, and I found that I can usually make this last for a couple of different dressings of a scrape or something. So if something happens on one day, I can open it up, use about half of it, and then fold it up and put it in a certain place in my bag to use the other half the next day or something. And then the other thing in that small baggie are butterfly bandages. I've got 5 in here. These can also be really nice to help hold a wound closed. All right, next, this is something I added recently because I've started spending a lot more time hiking in places where I will need this. These are wipes that you can use when you touch poison ivy, poison oak, or poison sumac. The wipes are great because they have specific things in them or on them that will remove the oils from those poisonous plants that are irritating your skin. Down here, I've got all of my medications. This is allergy medication, and I've put there the type of medication that it is, the dosage, how long it lasts, that kind of thing. Always good to have some Benadryl with you. Next is ibuprofen. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, I've got the dosage and everything else right there on the bag. I will say, as far as expiration dates, I personally am comfortable keeping stuff in my backpacking first aid kit for up to a year after the expiration date. One thing I had to do when I'm updating it for this season is I got rid of this old bag of ibuprofen. It's now been expired for 2 years. So taking this out and replacing it with some fresher ibuprofen. And the other medication I take is some anti-diarrheal. Another thing, thank goodness, I've never had to use, but I always take just in case because, man, that could just ruin a trip. And the next thing I've added was because of one particular bad experience that I had. These are called sting wipes or sting kill, and these are useful after you've been stung by a bee. That happened to me on a recent adventure race. My brother and I were tromping through the woods because that's what you do on an adventure race. We apparently came across some bees. He got stung. We ran a little bit away so that he could take care of it. We thought we were far enough away, but some bees followed him because when you get stung, bees release a pheromone that sends other bees around them into attack mode, and then that can result in additional stings. As we were standing there, my brother was taking care of his bee sting. I actually got stung. These wipes, they say, should take away those pheromones, and so that doesn't happen. So I always take a few sting wipes now. All right, because I hike in tick country, I now always take a pair of fine tipped tweezers. You can get a pack of 3. These ones were $10 on Amazon for a pack of 3. They work really, really well for taking out ticks, just because of how fine those tips are there. Next, this half a contact case, which unless you saw my last video, you're wondering what the heck this is. This is actually anti-chafe cream called Squirrel's Nut Butter. I love it. They used to only sell it in larger containers, and so I actually bought a contact case, cut it in half, and then put some in here because that made it really easy to take a small amount. They sell it in smaller cans now, but only on the website. I'll put a link to Amazon where I think you can get a 1/2 ounce tub or maybe a 2 ounce tub on Amazon, but on their website, the Squirrel's Nut Butter website, you can get a 1/4 of an ounce tiny container. That might work better than this if you don't feel like buying a contact case, cutting it in half. And of course, once this is gone, or if you buy the smaller tub, once that's gone, you can just refill it from a larger one. Anti-chafe cream has made a really big difference for me on some days when something just starts rubbing the wrong way. That can ruin a trip really, really fast. The other things in here are some fingernail clippers. It's amazing how many times I've forgotten to clip my toenails or fingernails before I go on a trip, so I just like having those with me. And then a small knife, just in case I didn't bring or forgot or lost a large knife that I brought with me. Always good having just a small pocket knife. And then the last first aid item I'll mention is some athletic tape. This is sort of a partial roll. This has been really, really useful. In fact, one time I used it to field repair a trekking pole. It's also been really helpful to have this much for twisted or sprained ankles. I've also wrapped some around fingers when I'm getting blisters on kayaking trips. That's the first aid items. Let's move over to the repair kit items. This is another one that I started taking because of a recommendation from somebody in the comments. These are zip ties. They're super cheap, super small, super packable. These could really come in handy in a lot of different ways, so I include them in my repair/emergency kit. And the next thing I'll mention are some tenacious tape patches. You can buy this in rolls as well, but the thing I would use this for is to repair a hole in a sleeping pad or something like that, or maybe a tent. So I like the idea of having patches. It's a little bit more expensive than just buying the roll and cutting your own, but a lot more convenient. And it comes in this little carry case that will keep them safe from getting damaged or something like that when it's rubbing around in your first aid kit. So tenacious tape gear patches. And in a similar vein, this is Gorilla Tape. I do have a large roll of Gorilla Tape, so I just rolled some onto itself and then I put it into this pill bag to keep it clean. This is just like a little puck of Gorilla Tape that I've rolled onto itself. All right, let's put it back in here. The next few things also all in pill bags. These are safety pins. I just have a few that I pulled off of some old race bibs. As with everything else, I'll put a link below just in case you don't have any safety pins around the house and you're trying to find some. Similar to the zip ties, these could be really useful for a broken zipper, something like that. Taking some safety pins is always nice. Next item, these are some of those compressed towels. You've probably seen these before. It's a really small towel that is just compressed. You put a drop of water on it, and then you basically have a little wipe. I put them in a pill bag to keep them clean, and then I've got them in my first aid kit so they're not rolling around somewhere else. These are actually fire plugs or fire starters. They're from a brand called Blackbeard. You can get them on Amazon. They're a little cheaper on the manufacturer's website, so I'll put a link to that below as well. They're waterproof, but I like having them in this bag just so they're not rolling around and getting ruined in my first aid kit. As I said, it's sort of a first aid / emergency / repair kit. And then fire starters aren't any good with something to start them. I always have a mini Bic lighter in my pot with my stove because it doesn't have a igniter on it. These mini Bic lighters take up so little room, I just throw one in my first aid / emergency kit. And that obviously pairs nicely with the fire starters. You can usually pick these up at the gas station for about $2. I'll put a link to Amazon below as well. I think they are a little cheaper at Walmart. Let me show you how I pack all this up and then we'll weigh it. The repair kit, I put all of this stuff over here in this, just a little snack bag. Put that aside. Grab this bigger and thicker stuff first. Oh, and I should tell you, this bag, I looked for a long time for some kind of a bag that I could recommend to put first aid kits into. And the reason I didn't have one for a long time is for the longest time, I've just been using this bag that I got for free. You can see it's pretty beat up because it's been going in and out of packs for years now. These bags are really cool. They're actually reusable quart-size freezer bags. So I bought them specifically intended for pasta sides, rice sides. I can put them in here and then put the boiling water in here. They'll cook right in here. They work really well for that because then I can bring them home, wash them, and use them again. It reduces waste. They're nice and durable. And I realized that they would work really well for my first aid kit. So that's what I put them in now. I'll put a link to these down below as well. Let's keep putting this bigger stuff in. The other trick is these two things I'll actually put down inside the roll of athletic tape. And there you go. It all fits in that reusable quart-sized freezer bag really, really well. All right, let's see how much this thing weighs, because we know that matters. Looks like about 360 grams, or just under 13 ounces. Pretty light for a first aid kit that has everything that I need. As I said already, I would love to know what you include in your first aid kit. Let us know in the comments down below. And remember, life is better with some dirt in it.